Okay, so just a quick recap of what we covered in our last session. We spoke about the basics of reporting. In the basics, we covered what exactly is a report writer tool, what do we mean by data sources, business objects, class report fields. We spoke about the different ways in which the Workday reporting tool can be leveraged. You can build worklets, dashboards, embedded analytics above and beyond the normal reports. We also spoke about the different kind of reports that can be built in Workday, like advanced, simple, transpose, search, composite, etc. And then we spoke about the different kind of type of instances or objects that are stored in Workday. Like we have text fields, we have currency, we have numerical, date, and instance fields. We also distinguish between the primary business object and the related business object, in the sense that primary business object is something that is built off the data source, and most of your fields will work on the PBO. A related business object would be something that is not directly available on the data source but can be pulled via the primary business object. Now, talking about that, let me quickly get into the tenant and explain you the difference between the two, how exactly PBO and RBO works in Workday terms. So let me log into the tenant first. Yeah. So can you see the tenant?
Yes.
Okay. So let me just quickly get into the. So I'm picking up this very commonly used data source in Workday, which is called as business process transaction. This data source is primarily used whenever you want to build a report that looks at the various kind of business processes or events that happen in Workday. If I'm talking in HCM terminologies, events like hire, termination, staffing events like change job, promotions, transfers, or compensation related events like salary changes, your merit plan changes, your bonus plan changes, one-time payment. All these are business process events in Workday. So in Workday, whatever happens as a transaction is classified as business process transaction. And if we ever want to build a report to fetch data on those kind of transactions, we always build a report on business process transaction data sources. So if you recall from our last excuse me, if you recall from our last session, I had explained the object model, right, which goes from bottom to top. In the object model, if we have to first figure out which fields do we use in Workday, and then we have to then see which particular business object will these fields be built of. Is there more than one business object? Then we have to pick up as per our need which is the business object we need to build those fields. And then once we have finalized the fields and the business object, we have to figure out the correct data source that will provide us that field. So that's what I'm explaining. We have given that we already know the data source, which happens to be business process transactions. I'm going to show you what exactly is the primary business object and what exactly is your what do we call as the related business object. So this is the business process transaction data source. If you can see multiple objects with the same name in them, and but the prefix or the suffix next to that will help you identify if it's a report field, if it's a data source, if it's a custom field, or if it's a business object. So that's how we get to know that, okay, if this is a business data source, if it's this field, or it's a business object. This particular context helps us identify that. I'm right now concerned with the data source. There are two kind of data sources here. Standard and indexed. Standard, like I mentioned, are mostly slow performing data sources, and indexed are those data sources which are high performing, which means that if you build a report on indexed data source, the run time or the output time is very less. But if you build a report on standard data source, it might take more processing time, just delaying the output time of that particular report. So if you can see, I'm going to right now work on the standard data source. It comes with Workday itself. We don't have to do anything. There's no manipulation required at our end. It comes with Workday itself. We are not supposed to do anything on that front. We have to only decide but so I'll show you. Our next slide is about which particular report can be built on what kind of data sources. So using that, you can identify that if you should be using a standard data source or an index data source. One
Okay.
more difference between a standard and index data source that I want you to remember is that on index data source, you cannot pull data as of effective date. Means if you're running the report or built on an index data source, it will only give you data as of the run day. So suppose I'm running a report today and it's built on an index data source. All the data will be pulled effective as of the run time, which is as of today. But in a standard data source, you have that leverage. So if your requirement is that I want to run the report for a past date or a future date apart from the current date, then we should always go with a standard data source. That's how it is. Usually these are the two major difference apart from the performance thing. These are the two major difference between the standard and index data source. Whenever a client says that, hey, I want an effective date prompt in my report so that I can run the report maybe of a prior date or a future date, then you always should build the report on a standard data source because index data source will not let you do that. We'll talk about it. When
Okay.
I'll be building a report, I'll show you what exactly effective date and all means. Okay. So that those are the two major differences. Okay. So this is how it looks like basically. Yeah, this is how it looks like. This is the business process transaction data source. If you will see, every particular data source has a primary business object. By that we mean all the fields can be pulled on the primary business objects, which are built of the primary business object. If they are not built of the primary business object and you still want to pull the field on the primary business object, you will have to see if they are built on the related business objects. So I'll show you how exactly do we see what all related business objects are available for a data source. So suppose I'm building a report on business process transaction, all those fields which are directly available. So let me open this particular primary business object. Yeah, so this whenever you view a business object in Workday, these are the tabs which you can look at. The one is the fields. Now this field is something which is delivered on this business object. In the sense, if you want any of these fields in your report, you can directly pull it on the action event business object. So you see, you can see a list of large number of delivered, Workday delivered fields, also the calculated fields if someone has built it. So you can see those are the list of fields that you can see here. Also, the description tab very well tells you what each of these fields are about. Like about worker is the field for that will give you the name of the worker on whom this business process transaction was conducted. Action event is basically the particular event which will be returned for this. Then comes your let me just find a relevant ones. All comments will give you all the comments that were entered as a part of the business process transaction. Usually when the steps goes to different security groups, they tend to enter comments while approving those steps or while reviewing those steps. So if you want all those steps, this is the field you should be using. So this particular entire 463 items are the list of workday delivered plus calculated fields that are built on action event business object. So this is a very good place to look at these. Then comes related business object. Now, like I said, every data source can have only one primary business object, but many a times the fields that we use in a report is not necessarily built of that primary business object. Many a times they are built on a different business object. So we have to see that if this particular field is built on a different business object, let me talk about something called as position proposed. Now, whenever business process transaction happen, there are changes in values, right? It might lead to change in your salary figure, it might lead to change in your manager, it might lead to change in your position, it might lead to change in your organization, right? Usually business process transaction causes changes in the various data fields for a particular kind of transaction. So what, suppose I have to pull position current and position proposed, which happens to be the old and new position for this particular business process transaction. And I have figured out that there is a Workday delivered field called position proposed. And I know that this particular field is not built of action event. I'm using business process transaction as a data source, which happens to have action event as the primary business object. But this field position proposed is not built on action event. So what is the, then I have to identify which is the business object this field is built on. So suppose this particular field is built on something called as worker business process as the business object. So what I have to see is that, is there any way that worker business process is related to action event? If yes, you can very easily pull this particular field in your report using worker business object as your related business object. So let me show where you do that. This fields tab, like I said, will show you the list of all the fields built of action event. Related business object tab will show you all the business objects which are not primary BOs on this particular data source, but can any field built on these particular business object can be brought into your report if action event happens to be the primary BO. Okay, you're getting up till here what I'm trying to
Yes.
explain?
Yeah.
That is also, all these structures that I'm talking about are all Workday delivered. We cannot manipulate it. We can bring fields and all in formats that we want. When we'll be talking about the calculated field sessions, I'll show you how can you build fields, how can you bring secondary business object fields on primary business objects and things like those sort. But we cannot add anything. The list that is here, 141 items and 298 items, this is the final list. Workday keeps updating it with every upgrade that comes it, but that, it's not on in our hands. This is all done from the background, all these
Okay.
things.
Okay.
Yeah, so this cannot be manipulated.
Okay.
Now let's look at what each of these two tabs mean. So if you can see, there are two tabs: links to related business object and links from related business object. Okay. Now links to related business object is basically that if action event is your primary business object, you can build fields built of these particular business objects. So let me find, so like I said, position proposed is a field on worker business process. So let me filter and see if they have worker business process available here. Yes, there is a related BO called worker business object. So let me filter on that. And then this particular number will show you which particular field will, so if you have worker business process available as a RBO on action event, there are two ways you can bring the field. Either simply put that RBO in your report under the column section and pull that relevant field. But if that's not an option, and I'll tell you when that's not an option, matrix reports, trending reports, they don't let you do that. In that case, we will have to build calculated fields, and I'll show you when we are doing calculated field session next week. I'll show you how exactly can you bring these fields on the primary BO. So if you will see, these are the two fields. If you want to bring fields of worker business process BO, you either use worker business process as a field to bring that field, or you use edit service date business process. Totally depends on your requirement. If your field is relevant to service date business process, you use this particular field. But if your field is otherwise relevant to worker related BPs, you use this field. It's basically on your requirement. My position proposed is maybe related to, not related to service date BP. Its position is changing as a result of maybe a change of transaction. In that case, I will be using worker business process as my field, and I'll be pulling position proposed field of that. Okay. Now, if you further want to dig into this particular what do you say, related business object and see the details of it, I will recommend open this business object in a new tab. This takes a while, the remote. So Yeah, so just like action event, you can also evaluate your worker business process details. Suppose for a data source, maybe worker business process happens to be the primary view. And if you need to do similar, I will say a scrutiny for this particular, that what are the unrelated views available. This also has a tab, similar tab for that. And you can very well look at this particular BO details as well. So suppose I'm talking about position proposed and I want to see if there is any such field available here. So I'm just gonna type position and gonna click on OK. There are so many position related fields, but see, I'm mostly concerned with position current and position proposed. So let me filter on this and let me see what exactly do these fields do. So let me show you the description of these fields. See, position current is a field which is the position of the worker prior to this business process. Position proposed is a field which is the new position of the worker after the business process. So you're seeing this is how we define all our report fields. Which BOs will give me those fields? Will it be directly available on the data source? Do I need to pull it off a related BO? If a related BO, do I need to build calculated fields and things of those sort? So that's how you assess your entire, I will say, object model before you start building the report. So let me go back to the action event one. So like I said, there are two tabs, right? Links to related business object. So this is primarily if action event happens to be the primary BO, these are the set of related BOs you can use. But what if it's vice versa? Means maybe my primary BO is not action event, but it's suppose a beneficiary event. I'm building a report which has a data source that has primary BO as beneficiary event. In that case, is action event related? Can I bring action event related fields to that particular report? I will have to check. I will go under the action event BO and I will see, yes, beneficiary event has a link to action event. And what is the field? This is the field. This particular beneficiary event will give me all these particular kind of details. So that's how we do it. Whenever you're building a report of action event, you will use this particular tab. If you're building a report of these particular BOs and you want action event to be related to that particular BO, we use this particular tab. Okay.
Okay.
That's how we go about primary and secondary business object. I hope that's clear about the
Yeah.
structure of primary and secondary or related BOs. Okay. Let me get into the, just a second. Yeah. So like I said, we were talking about what we call as what we call as uh, what kind of data sources can be used in different kind of reports. One of those, if you are you able to see the deck? So those data sources are primarily standard and indexed in nature. Now, like we said, there are different kinds of reports that we can build in Workday, right? Now, simple reports can use both standard and index data sources. Advanced reports can also use both standard and index. Rather, matrix reports can also use both standard and index data sources. Search and inbox reports strictly use only index data sources. If you try to build a search report on any other data source, it will not it will not let you select a standard report. It's standard data source itself. Transpose reports again can be built on both standard and index. And composite report, the reason it's not listed here is because they are not built on data sources. So that's why when we'll talk about composite report sessions, I'll show you how composite report is not built on data sources, and thus there is no need of actually highlighting that particular thing over here. So that's about that. Next thing, this is just a slide that I would just like you to go through these three reports and see how exactly, because these are very handy reports. These are reports that help you explore features that are delivered by Workday. Things like if you want to see what all business objects are there, especially related to your financing, your journal lines and everything, you can very well leverage the business object details report. Let me actually get into the tenant and show you that. So let me open the business object detail report. So this is the business object details report. If you will click here, this will you need to type. So suppose I'm just looking for something related to journal. Okay, I'm just gonna type word journal, and I'm gonna see there are so many business objects related to the word journal. Maybe I'm interested in journal line right now, so I'm just gonna click on that. So there are two ways to do that. Either you follow the route that I showed you, you type the BO name in the search bar, you open that business object tab and everything. That's about it. Or this is one way. You open the business, so see, the same tab is opening here, right? If I access it via the business object detail report, the same tab opens up over here. So this is the journal line particular business object. You can see all the list of fields, the calculated ones as well, the RBOs and the data source as well. One good thing, you can also see the reports, the standard reports that are, what do we say, built of journal lines in Workday. The Workday delivered reports built of journal lines. So this is a very handy report that usually comes, especially for new beginners to explore the Workday setup. Okay.
Okay.
The second report here is all standard reports. This is also a very interesting report. So suppose, like I said, whenever requirement comes, first try to see if there is a standard report available in Workday for that purpose or not. So let me open that. So all this is the data source that they are opening. I don't know why does this report not come in this tenant. Let me just type it. Yeah, it's called Workday Standard Reports. So this is the delivered report you can explore. Now, suppose I'm working on a report related to expense line, right? So let me just see what particular. So maybe I am interested in reports related to maybe. Let me just pick up your financials. Yeah, maybe reports related to financial accounting, or maybe a report related to expenses. So I'm going to click on expenses and financial accounting, and I'm going to see what are the different kind of reports which are standard reports which Workday provides as a delivered report related to these categories. So this is also very good. So under expenses category, you can see the report name. You can see, so report writer primarily means you can copy this report definition and tweak it as per your need. Had it been an espresso report, you would not been able to copy the definition. All you can do is view the output of the report, nothing else can be done. So that's the difference between a report writer and a espresso report in Workday. This will tell you whether this report is a report writer or an espresso report. Then comes your domain. So like if you want to understand what all security groups can run this report, this domain lets you tell me. So suppose I want to understand which domain lets you run the standard report of average expense cycle time. I'm going to click on this domain. I'm going to see the list of security groups that have access to this domain. How do I see this? I go there and I do view security policy. And this is how you can see that. So if you can see, these are the list of security groups that can run reports related to this. If at all these security groups are the ones that you're looking to run this report, well and good. If not, then you might have to approach your respective security team to see if you can open the domain to the security group you want this report to be run by. So that's how we go about assessing the security details of standard report. The next in line is, it's not a tough task. Usually the things happen is it's a if the requirement is complex, yes, it might become tough. It's not usually tough. The configuration and all is pretty easy. If you know what kind of security groups you need to build and what access do you need to provide, it's easy. But many a times the configuration is such that we cannot usually go the Workday deliver methodology. Then we need to apply our own logic and things, just like any other. Even in the world of reporting, it becomes tough and easy based on the requirement that is given to us. So maybe your security structure is complex, which is making that job complex, but it's not really a very tough domain to handle.
Okay.
So the security people are usually Their role is to create security groups and assign them the required access. Now, there can be various kind of security groups. I'm not going to get into that. But yeah, their job is usually creating the security groups based on the needs of that particular security requirement.
Okay.
The next report that comes very handy as a beginner for us is the data sources report. This shows you the list of all the data sources that are there in Workday that can be explored in Workday. So suppose if you know that, okay, this I have to build a report on this particular data source, but you don't know what is the permitted security groups, if at all it has a data source filter, what exactly will this data source return? This happens to be the place to explore that. So if you will see, you have so many of finance related data sources here, adjustment lines, pays, print runs, all these data sources are mentioned here. You also happen to see the primary business objects on this particular list. And then you can see if it's a standard or an index data source, whether there are any inbuilt prompts. By inbuilt prompts, I'll show you what exactly do we mean later in the sessions. But yeah, you get to understand that as well. And if at all there are any data sources filter, means is this data source already filtered automatically by Workday, or you need to add manual filters to achieve that particular result. So this is also a very handy report that one can explore in Workday. So now with this, we have covered the basics of reporting. Actually, my agenda for today was also to help you understand advanced report, and I would have demoed and showed you how to build advanced reports in Workday. But given we were 30 minutes late, we will be covering that tomorrow. So yeah, this is all about you need to understand to get started with reporting in Workday. Once you have understood the object model, you will be able to better relate when I will start building reports in Workday, what exactly all of these means and things of those sort. Like when I'll be talking more about data sources, primary business objects and things of those sort, you'll be able to understand that much better. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, let's then catch up again tomorrow, and let's meet tomorrow again. We'll be talking entirely about advanced reports tomorrow. The entire 1 hour will be dedicated to that. And next week onwards, we'll talk about calculated fields and matrix. We are running behind by 3 days, but it's okay. We'll be able. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Bye.